Yeah, what is happening in Italy right now or in Greece is not unique to these countries. It's a relatively new phenomenon in the sense that up to now the so-called developed countries, the OECD countries, have been mostly importing their raw materials to a greatest extent from other parts of the world, from Latin America, from Russia, energy, etc., etc. What we are seeing now is development of this commodity or raw materials frontier within the region of Europe, which is it's a new phase in this. In the extraction patterns of these materials. And we are talking here about gas, not only gas fracking, but also deep sea gas drilling. In Cyprus, for example, there are very big investment projects under preparation to extract gas from the sea outside of Cyprus, between Cyprus and the Middle East. In Greece, there is a surge of interest on projects that have been stopped in the past and abandoned about gold mining in the north of the country, in Chalkidiki. There is an intense social debate. Up to now, it hasn't materialized into very extended explorations, but explorations and interest has started about deep sea drilling of oil in the Aegean. Environmentally very problematic development in the sense that the Aegean is a closed sea, and if an accident happens there, it will be environmentally devastating. If something like what happened to the Gulf of Mexico happens in the Aegean, would be disastrous. We see in Spain a surge of coal mining with very damaging techniques. So the question which would concern us, I would say, as researchers, is why is this happening now? Why now? And why back in Europe? One might argue that there is nothing particular about this why question, and that it's simply driven by resource patterns, market patterns, and by the growing social metabolism. So there's growing demand for energy and raw materials. These are places which they have energy and raw materials. In the past, they couldn't be extracted because they were very expensive, but now we have new technologies. We didn't have gas fracking 30 years ago. We have it now. We couldn't drill very deep in the sea 30 years ago. We can now. So we need these materials. Even if economies like the US and Europe are not growing very much, they still have a very high demand for materials. We have also growing economies like the Chinese economies, other Asian economies. So there is a demand for material, and this is the place where the material is. This is what we are going to do, extract it. So this would be the easy answer. A more complicated question is if there is any relation also with the fact that Europe is undergoing the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression. And I hypothesize there, I can't prove it yet, that there definitely is some pattern. At least I can say that, or I can speculate that for my country, Greece. I've written something short on that, arguing that what's happening now in Greece is the backfall into a kind of developing country status. This is obvious through the structural adjustment programs of the IMF, the World Bank, etc., that up to now they haven't been implemented in the core of capitalist economies, but now we see it implemented, and Greece was the first country to experience that. And this has had several effects. It has had effects in the sense of pressing wages down in a way that would not be possible to do before, and also watering down and pressing down environmental regulation and labor and social regulation, and in the past was very difficult to be bypassed. So in the context of the crisis and in the pretext of the crisis, the government now uses extra parliamentarian powers to bypass normal legal or social obstacles to development projects that we wouldn't be able to do in the past. So in a broad sense, we can say that this decrease of both labor costs and social costs in terms of regulatory costs to extraction have made investment in these countries, in countries such as Greece, much more attractive than it would otherwise be. So in a developed country with very strong regulation that respects also the court system and labor rights, etc., it's much more difficult to squeeze profit out of a given investment because these things cost and cut out of the profit of the company. The more you suppress this cost down, the more profitable an investment becomes. So I think there is a combination of both the changing and expanding global metabolism and market and the rising prices in the markets of these materials that make investment seek opportunities elsewhere, and at the same time, the structural adjustment and the crisis context that makes it more profitable than it would otherwise be to invest in these countries.